It's so much more powerful, kind of to your point around data. Like data is great, but it's the story that you can actually tell with that data. And that's what's really powerful. And that's what's going to stick in people's minds and want them to continually invest. And it's funny because you hear these anecdotes, and I'll hear kind of like if I'm listening to some of these sales calls or if I'm listening to some of our CSM calls, and you'll hear these like anecdotes pop out and so forth. And now that wasn't a deck. That wasn't this whole enablement session that we had to do. But you know what they remembered? They remembered that customer story.
Revenue boosters, tips now in the fast lane. Watch your profits grow. Welcome to the Riff Up Podcast.
Hey everybody, I am so excited to welcome Allison Hevener to the pod. She's the SVP of Marketing and Community at TrustRadius. And TrustRadius is a buyer intelligence platform, which is a very cool thing. There's a few of them out there, but they do something really special, and they have over 12 million annual users. So I'm super excited to learn from Allison today. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Greg. Excited to dive into a lot of fun topics.
Totally. Before we jump into the nitty gritty of what you've learned and what you can share, why did you decide to join TrustRadius?
Oh, it's been a journey, actually a really fun journey over the last 3 years at TrustRadius. So I actually came from a much larger company in the ad tech industry called LiveRamp. I started my career in marketing there in 2013. It was a 40-person startup. And I was one of the first kind of non-engineering hires, which is really scary and also really exciting because there's so much kind of green space that I could go into and really start to like hone in my skill set. But I really fell in love with marketing. I really loved the idea of how are we going to tell our story out in market? How we're such a kind of innovative company. Data onboarding for digital advertising was not a thing when LiveRamp started. So we had to create this whole new category. We had to kind of bring down so much of what was kind of the status quo and really challenge the status quo when it came to digital advertising. And that was something really, really excited to me. So I started my career in field marketing, grew it to run our brand, corporate, integrated marketing, and LiveRamp grew from 40-person, $10 million company to we IPO'd, and now it's almost like a $700 million company. So it was a wild ride for sure, but really, really fun. And then when I was ready to kind of take, I think everybody in their career, they start to think about what's next and what am I really good at? And one thing that I knew I was really good at was building. I knew I could build a really well-oiled marketing machine. I knew I could build a team, and I wanted to take that skill set and put it to the test. And so the CEO of TrustRadius had reached out to me, and we started talking about the VP of marketing role. And really, they were looking for someone to come in and rebuild their entire marketing department. They wanted to really rethink the way that they were approaching marketing and their entire go-to-market, really. And it, again, looking at being a person that likes to be over their skis, really likes a challenge. I was kind of ready for that big jump. So I made the leap over to TrustRadius about 3 years ago. And it has been definitely everything that I expected and more. And it's, everybody in the tech industry over the last 5 years has been on this roller coaster. And so I think TrustRadius is definitely not immune to that. And we work with a lot of technology providers. So it's been really eye-opening to kind of ride out the changes that are hitting our ecosystem, and how do we continue to drive value for our customers? How are we continuing to learn from each other and really pushing kind of like the whole industry and tech industry forward?
That's awesome. Very cool. What a cool journey. I have to ask because it really caught my eye. You're the SVP of Marketing and Community. I love community. I think community is such an amazing way for brands to connect people to each other. And 1 + 1 does equal 3 or even 5 in many cases. So at TrustRadius, what does it mean for you to have community in your title? How do you use community within your platform?
So if you think about TrustRadius as kind of this this marketplace, right? We have these two sides of the house. So millions of buyers come to TrustRadius who are doing a bunch of research to understand which technology makes the best fit their business use cases and really, again, drive value for their company. And then we work with all the vendors to help them kind of capture that customer voice through reviews, put all this product information at the hands of the buyers so they can make that really informed, confident decision. And so when we think about community, it's really about bringing those two groups together. So one, sellers can actually sell to their ICP, that ideal customer, and buyers are actually buying technology for their use cases and not spending all this money on something that's just going to sit on the shelf. They're buying something that doesn't actually fit their use cases. And so we're trying to bridge that gap between those two communities. So that's kind of a part of my remit. So it's not just our go-to-market, but it's like, how are we building this kind of marketplace together?
That's super cool. So, and what does that look like? How do you bring them? So you connect them to each other, but are you mostly just connecting the buyers and the marketers of the technology, or are other interesting ways for you to connect people to each other?
Yeah, I think if we focus on some of our customers that we work with, at the end of the day, and buyers honestly really like, we want to talk to each other. Like, I want to talk to other VPs of marketing at companies that are like the same size as TrustRadius, or maybe even a little bigger if we're thinking about scale. But at the end of the day, everybody wants to talk to their peers. We're constantly researching buyers, we're surveying them and trying to understand what are their expectations, how do they want to interact with different vendors, and ultimately, how are they making decisions and are they feeling confident about those? And so when you think about that, the more that we can bring these peers together to discuss what's going on in their industry, what are the problems that they're facing, the more that they're going to learn from their peers. And obviously the underpinnings are Trust Radius, but we want to make those connections because it's more advantageous for a world that you're selling to people that actually can use your product and you're not essentially selling churn down the road, right? And you're also using dollars in the right way. So you're driving ROI for your company. And what you're seeing is that a lot of buyers these days are super, super risk adverse. They're already really, really skeptical. And so you're trying to think about, okay, how are we creating these communities that are getting over these barriers of skepticism, a lot of mistrust. And so we do that within our customers and within our customer base and with buyers. And so specifically with our customers, we think about the communities around personas. So we work with a lot of different personas kind of across marketing and sales. And so how can we create these forums that they're discussing ideas, they're talking about what are their go-to-market challenges, how are they using TrustRadius to overcome those, how are they maybe not using TrustRadius, where are they low in adoption and maybe need to do some more investment. And they're also, we listen to a lot of this and we hear from our customers, we're like, wow, that's a great idea. Like, that actually just fuels like our product marketing and a lot of our demand gen where we're like, we should be making playbooks about this. So we really use our kind of like our philosophy around this community building and learning from each other and connecting peers. But we really use that to like fuel the rest of our kind of strategy when it comes to like our business as TrustRadius.
That's so cool. It seems so deeply embedded. It makes sense that it's part of your title. It's really cool to see how that actually plays out within the product, on the buyer side, on the customer and client side, and how they all sort of fit together. I know I personally use community to vet out different products that I would be thinking about. I would have to look at reviews, but asking friends, hey, I'm at this stage, I'm thinking about these two products. How would you think about that decision? Because that kind of narrative is sometimes also more valuable than data. So learning from other folks at a similar stage, at a similar industry is really, really cool that you're facilitating that kind of connection. Very, very cool. So how do you think about the KPIs of community? Like, so you're bringing people together, what does that look like? Well, how do as a marketer, it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of cost. Like, how do you think about that actually driving value or being worth your efforts and time as a marketer?
There's a couple of things that are like bottom line. At the end of the day, like when we were bringing our customers together, it's all about customer engagement, KPIs. It's all about customer adoption, KPIs. And then ultimately that's leading to our renewals and expansions, right? That's the most basic way to look at it. I also think that when you're thinking about the anecdotal, like, people love stories. So the anecdotes that you get from these are like so, so valuable. So we have our all hands and we get together and I'm like, we can look at all the KPIs as all we want. And that's good. That's your pulse. That's making sure like, hey, these communities that we're building within our customer base, like these are really, really valuable. And these are obviously influencing our those bottom funnel KPIs that we're looking at. And that's like your gut check. But really it's the anecdotes, right? Like hearing from your customers and then kind of jumping on, maybe they even come onto the all hands and they're talking about their experience. It's so much more powerful, kind of to your point around like data. Like data is great, but it's the story that you can actually tell with that data. And that's what's really powerful. And that's what's going to stick in people's minds and want them to continually invest. And it's funny because you hear these anecdotes and I'll hear kind of like if I'm listening to some of these sales calls or if I'm listening to some of our CSM calls and you'll hear these like anecdotes pop out and so forth. And now that wasn't a deck. That wasn't this whole enablement session that we had to do. But you know what they remembered? They remembered that customer story. And I think that goes just to show how powerful the customer voice is and getting that in front of your company. Because that engineer that's not talking to the customer, the product person that maybe not have all this exposure to the customer, they're going to remember those anecdotes. And so while I think KPIs are really important and to keep a pulse check on things, I think it's really the anecdotes that come from a lot of our customer engagement things that we do that really resonate within TrustRadius. And then that's what they remember. And that's what gets pushed out into the market.
Fantastic. It makes sense. Sometimes KPIs aren't the right way to capture things. All right. I want to talk about a really top of mind topic for everyone. You have all this data, you have all the interaction with 12 million users. What's your AI strategy right now as a marketer? What are you using? How are you thinking about it? What's happening there?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it a little bit more of TrustRadius kind of like as a whole and how we think about, we're kind of sitting to your point, like on a treasure trove of buyer insights. People are constantly like, if you think of the 12 million users, they're looking at your pricing, they're comparing you to your competitors, they're leaving reviews, they're looking at your product demo, they're looking at whatever the content is, clicking on that CTA that you have. There's so much happening in terms of buyers interacting with you that isn't necessarily something that you can completely aggregate and analyze. And some of our really sophisticated customers do that. And so one thing that we're trying to help our customers do is one is how can you take of what buyers are doing and saying about you on TrustRadius? How can I take those insights and really have that influence our go-to-market, our brand messaging? One customer, for example, was doing a brand audit. And they're like, we really want to understand what people are saying about us in our reviews. What are the keywords that they're using? How are they talking about us when comparing us to our competitors? And so we're like, great, let's use AI to do the analysis with the reviews to answer essentially those questions. And the nice thing about it is that you can really isolate it to just reviews on TrustRadius. And so if you think about TrustRadius and how we kind of differentiate, it's really that the in-depthness of reviews. Our reviews average over 400 words per review. We have some of the most sophisticated fraud detection in the industry. So we actually reject 60% of the reviews that we get at TrustRadius because of either quality, AI written, right? So it all has to be original content.
No, I'm writing most of my content with AI these days.
Well, any kind of fraudulent, like if it's a reviewer that actually wasn't a customer, they're creating fake profiles and things like that. So it's like a very healthy source of data to actually do this kind of AI analysis, because when you kind of do it out of a broader sense, you can't do the kind of controls that you want on the inputs, right? I think every AI talk that I've heard is like garbage in, garbage out. Well, yeah, that's not rocket science. And so that's what a lot of our customers look to us to do, where it's like, we want to do a lot of this analysis, but we only want certain data points that are coming from TrustRadius. So we have control over what those outputs are and really kind of get the best quality. And then you can take that. I think when I think about brand, or you're doing these brand audits, like there's nothing worse than a brand audit to a marketer, because they're like, oh my God, it's going to be 6 months. And by the time I get it, it's going to be worthless. And nothing should ever take 6 months. Like we're living in a world that nothing should take 6 months. And so when you can say, okay, great, we could do this in real time, and we're actually getting our customer voice and building a brand message from there, that's really powerful because mostly people are like, I'm going to put a quote on my website. And like they're shoehorning in this customer voice versus really having it be foundational to who they are as a company and what's being represented out in the market.
That's awesome. So basically they have all that. That's not part of the product per se. It's something that you guys are doing as a marketing team to take the data in there, use AI, and build this report for the other stakeholders within your customer base or potential customer base. How are you thinking about using that type of report?
Yeah, so it just depends. Like some of our customers ask us for this. We've done this in terms of kind of from an SEO perspective too,
Wow.
where we've helped people. Because if you think about it, a lot of reviews are so keyword rich and they're the kind of like those long tail keywords and phrases. And so we'll help people understand, okay, if I start using a lot of this kind of language, and then I also embed these like quotes and things like that on my website, and Google's crawling this, great. Then I can actually improve my search rankings and I can improve the keyword rankings, the amount of keywords that I'm actually ranking for. So it just depends on like the use case essentially of like using AI to synthesize reviews, get insights from that, whatever the kind of use case it might be at the end. So mostly what it's been used for is, like I said, around brand audits. It's been used for SEO analysis. But yeah, there's a lot that are in reviews. And it's kind of sad if you're just like, hey, we got, 100 reviews and they just sit there. It's like, if they're really good quality, we should be harvesting those for insights and those customer stories, like all of those things. There's just a lot in there in those reviews.
I think there's something for all of us to learn. My personal takeaway is, hey, what can I do to pull data together, use AI to serve that up to potential customers as a selling tool, as a marketing tool to say, hey, here's a report that we put together that analyzes some data that we have or you have or the internet has. It's a very cool tactic using AI, not just to make something that's valuable is really, really, really cool. I think that is so interesting.
Yeah, and you'll start to see some of that like synthesis for like the buyers. So if you look a lot of our data, so buyers only really read 3 to 5 reviews. And they're the two main things when we survey them, what are you looking for when it comes to reviews? Obviously, the first thing is that they want to read a review from somebody like them. And then the second thing is the content. So they're like, we want really, really good content. Okay, great. Now, like, okay, I'll read the kind of like, and also the other thing is like reviewers will look for the 3-star review. They'll look for the middle ground because they're usually the people that are going to give you the most insight and kind of practical. They're not like the people that are like these great, crazy promoters that are like 5 stars. And they're not like the people that are like these detractors that are just pissed off about, whatever, X, Y, and Z. So they'll read those reviews, but then they also want like sentiment analysis. They also want just, what's like kind of the too long, don't read type of thing. And so we're using AI to help kind of synthesize those reviews for those buyers to get insights quicker on top of it, right? Because nobody has time. Nobody has time to do all this like really in-depth research. And so it's like, how can we help buyers get to kind of that end goal of making a confident decision? So synthesizing reviews and doing sentiment analysis is another way to kind of bring the reviews to life and help buyers, again, make those kind of the right decision for them.
That's awesome. I think it's super cool. I feel like there's something interesting about all these examples that you're using around how it seems like you as a marketer are almost a product person. You're thinking about not just what the marketing is. You're not talking about the blog. You're talking about the product. And it's so interesting that it's not just like you're not. It's more embedded, and it seems like you're really embedded into the TrustRadius product team, and it's all sort of integrated together with the platform and the customers and the marketing. I'm trying to put these pieces together, but how does that organizationally work? Like how do you wear those hats? How does that like manifest? It's really cool.
Yeah, it's easier. So if you think about it, and I think what you're getting to is I essentially sell to myself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So since I essentially sell the go-to-market teams in the B2B tech space, it makes life really fun.
No.
I love marketing to marketers. When I was at LiveRamp, we marketed to B2C companies. And again, I think marketers are the most fun to essentially work with, and trust me, they'll always be the ones that show up to your party. So, so anyways, so I think when you're talking to the product team, and we have these cross-functional teams, and products in there, engineering's in there, marketing, sales, CS, like we each have representatives from all of these organizations. And it's really important. We call them the X teams, and we have two kind of for our buyer side of the house and for our vendor side of the house. And each of these X teams, each of those representatives are coming from a perspective of, okay, hey, we're all doing this for like our ultimate goal of like our customer and the buyer. And so we need each of those perspectives so we can make decisions that are, one, collective, but two, we can take that back and like, okay, we made whatever decision. This is like the product launch we're going to do. Marketing, what are you going to do to support that? CS, what are you going to do to support that product? What's the timeline? It feels much more of a cohesive movement, if you will, within our organization. And it makes it, from a marketing perspective, it makes it a lot easier for me because would I buy this? Would I listen to this? And if the answer is no, right, we're missing something. We're missing the point on it. And so I think about that a lot, and it makes life a lot easier and a lot more fun when you're essentially selling to yourself.
I love that. Selling to yourself. I mean, that is the best, right? We're most empathetic with ourselves as personas. Absolutely. That's a nice luxury that you have. That's wonderful. Amazing. Allison, this is great. I've learned so much. I think number one, community. How do you embed community into and the voice of your customers and them talking to each other is just such a simple but obvious idea that everyone can think about using. Two is, I think, this idea of AI to synthesize your data and make it really easy and applicable and available to your users, your customers, either with the review summaries and also this idea of using AI to build these reports. And I'm still noodling on exactly how that manifests for other uses, but it feels like there's a really interesting nugget in there for all of us to take home. And something about that cross-functional, selling yourself, but cross-functionally integrating product and marketing and sales, engineering. It's really, really, really cool to sort of hear how that actually works at TrustRadius. So I appreciate that. Allison, if people want to learn more about you or TrustRadius, where should they look to find out some more information?
Yeah, well, easy enough. TrustRadius.com, very easy. Come and check it out. And then always happy to connect on LinkedIn. I love to hear from anyone's feedback, etc. So happy to connect.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Allison.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Rough up your ears, it's time to ignite. GTM leaders bringing secrets to light. Revenue boost.